Hey folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is a slightly late November wrap-up for 2019. So I did read quite a bit in November. I read pretty much everything electronically and I read most of it in the first couple of weeks when I was procrastinating on my final assignment for the year. So yeah, that was a thing. And most of the books were by the same author, although they weren't all rereads, which is good. So what did I start the month with? I started the month with a reread of The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie on audio. I actually think this might have accidentally been the second time I've listened to that this year, because when I was then looking back over my Goodreads page, it was already there. But anyway, I didn't mean it, but it happened. So, The Murder at the Vicarage, this is pretty much the first Miss Marple book, and a murder, funnily enough, happens in the study at the Vicarage. And Miss Marple is, of course, vital to solving the case. Then, see, this is when I started my binge of procrastination. I started reading Jann Rowland Pride and Prejudice variations again, but I actually went back and started, and most of the ones that I read were actually ones that I hadn't read before, because there's a whole bunch that I sort of haven't really been all that interested in reading until now. And I went, oh yeah. I mean, there's still some I haven't read because they're just tropes that I'm not interested in. But these ones are ones that I just hadn't gotten around to. A lot of them are more recent ones as well, because he does publish quite a lot in the year. So let's start. Very basic descriptions. I read them all really quickly, and so I don't remember a lot of the details. I'll probably reread them. But there was A Matchmaking Mother, which is where at the ball at Netherfield, Lizzie is introduced to Miss Darcy and her mother, Mrs. Darcy, who is still alive, which is different to the book. And they quite like Lizzie, and so they invite her and Jane to come and stay with them in London. And so, much to Mr. Darcy's horror. So, yes, so that's fun. And then there was Mr. Bennet Takes Charge, also by Jann Rowland, where Lizzie's trip to the lakes gets cancelled. She doesn't go to Derbyshire either. Then Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy do come back to Netherfield, and then Lizzie discovers that Lydia is going to elope, and Mr. Bennet actually takes action and defends his family from Wickham. So, yay! Then there's Another Proposal, in which Darcy proposes to Lizzie at Longbourn after Mr. Collins has been turned down, or something like that. Anyway, I can't remember quite the details, but Mrs. Bennet interferes, and so things go a bit odd, and Lizzie has to think about it. But yes, Mrs. Bennet is not going to let her turn down a second proposal. Then there's A Gift for Elizabeth, which is a Christmas story, which I can't remember the circumstances, but Lizzie is living with the Gardners because she, for some reason, can't live at Longbourn anymore. And so she's volunteering at an orphanage. And she meets Mr. Darcy and his little sister, who are also at the orphanage. So, because Mr. Darcy is one of the board members or something. So it's like this sweet Christmas story. And then there is, still on the Jann Rowlands, The Challenge of Entail, in which Mr. Bennet discovers a legal way where he can break the entail and therefore leave it to his oldest daughter, or whichever daughter he pleases, and therefore the fortunes of the Bennet sisters are changed. Then there is Whispers of the Heart, ta-da, in which Mr. Bingley marries Miss Darcy after Ramsgate in order to protect her reputation. And so when they arrive at Netherfield, Mr. Bingley is already married, and Mr. Darcy has his sister with him. So circumstances very different. Of course, in all of these, Lizzie ends up with Mr. Darcy. I don't often read anything else. I do occasionally like a story where Lizzie ends up with Colonel Fitzwilliam, but only if there's no actual like love triangle stuff, because outright love triangles are not my thing. Then there was A Tale of Two Courtships, in which Jane is in London when the party at Netherfield arrives, and so Lizzie meets them first and becomes friends with Mr. Bingley, and that changes everybody's interactions. And then the last of the new ones by Jann Rowland that I read was Coincidence, when at Rosings, Darcy actually realises Elizabeth doesn't like him before he proposes, and so that changes the course of their relationship, of course. Then I reread on audio Miss Marple's Final Cases, which is a collection of short stories about Miss Marple solving cases, and a really odd story at the end that doesn't seem to have Miss Marple in it, that involves some sort of creepy doll. It's a bit weird. Then I reread Open Your Eyes by Jann Rowland, which I hadn't read in a while, in which Lizzie is having her original conversation with Wickham, and realises that he's lying, and things change from there. And then I reread An Unlikely Friendship, which is one of my favourite Jann Rowlands, in which Caroline Bingley, not so bad, and actually becomes the matchmaker between Lizzie and Darcy. So that's good. Then I ended the month with something completely different, and I went to non-fiction, but still society, and I read another Anne Courcy book. I read a couple of her books earlier in the year. So she writes non-fiction about sort of British high society in the second half of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. So this one was Society's Queen, The Life of Edith, Marchioness of Londonderry. So this is the woman who she became the Marchioness of Londonderry when her father-in-law passed away, but she was upper class, full of energy, Scottish, married into an Irish family, but was very much a political hostess, and also did things like she was a suffragist, not a suffragette, but she was the one that organised, for example, the organisation, she created the organisation in World War I, which trained and found the women who took over the men's jobs when the men's went over to fight. So they started out by suggesting, well, perhaps we can be military cooks, and then perhaps we can be drivers, and then perhaps we can do agriculture. And so she was the one that organised that whole thing. So she was very interesting. Very interesting. Still, the one problem I have with these Anne de Courcy books is, while they supposedly focus on women, they do get sidetracked by the men in the women's lives a lot. So you got sidetracked by her husband and by her father and the other men that she knew. Part of that is because that was a society woman's role in life, was to be a hostess and to support the men. But it is sometimes frustrating when you're wanting to read about these amazing, well-educated, determined women, and suddenly we're reading about their husband, father, brother, friends. But yes, that's what I ended the month on. So that was really good too. So that was a lot of reading, but a lot of reading the same author. Not a lot of variety, I'm afraid. Not doing so well so far this December. So, but I am finishing work. I will have like a week or so at the end of the month when I will be in Tasmania. So maybe that will help. I'm actually in the middle of a few things. So I have been reading, but I just haven't really finished anything. Anyway, that is a story for my next wrap up. So yeah, as usual, if you like any of these books or want to know anything more about them, leave a comment down below. And I will see you all again really soon. Bye.